Volleyball Report. It is my pleasure to have David Kniffin, first-year head coach at UC Irvine. David, welcome home, first of all, one Anteater alum to another, and we're so glad to have you back in the program.
Thanks, Philly.
And for fans, if you don't know, David Kniffin now becomes our 5th Anteater alum to hold the title of head coach at one of our programs. Let's go back a little bit. You were an assistant coach in Illinois, coaching the women's side. And what made you decide to make that switch?
You know, the role of the assistant coach is to learn and, you know, hopefully someday become a head coach, I think. It's a very transient position by nature, and there's very few assistant coaches out there that think, hey, I'm going to get into this and I'm going to be an assistant coach forever. I think when I got into the job, you know, I didn't really know. You know, I was an alum from UCI, but I'd also been in a couple different programs before. You know, I was at Loyola Marymount University. They dropped the program. I went over to Pierce Junior College, and then I eventually came to UC Irvine, played my junior and senior year here. And I wasn't ready to close the book on volleyball. And so I went over, I played a couple years in Spain. And then the position became full-time here. The assistant coaching position became full-time my second year in Spain. And John gave me a phone call and said, hey, you know, this position's opening up. You're the first guy that came to mind. Would you be interested in being an assistant coach? And I think at that point, I just kind of walked into the position. It wasn't something I ever really planned on. But after being here for 4 or 5 years, the volleyball component remained a passion, as it always had been for me. But the administrative component, the managing, facilitating the growth and kind of these transitional years for the guys, that became more and more appealing. And I think I started to recognize that I was going to have to take a step at some point, and going to Illinois was the natural step. But again, it's a position that fell into my lap. You know, it was a phone call that I received from the head coach there, who was a friend of a friend in the volleyball world, and he said, you know, I want you to come check this out, because if you think you want to be a coach down the road, we're in the business of creating head coaches. And, you know, we've got a culture that's similar to UC Irvine, different obviously on the female side, but it just seemed like the right fit. So
we don't talk to a lot of volleyball players, you know, afterwards, and I know we've had, you know, quite a few, both on the men and the women, play overseas. But what is life like for a volleyball player overseas? And was it difficult to give up that lifestyle to come back and, you know, give up the pro career and to play and to become coach?
Well, again, playing professional in terms of volleyball is a very relative term. You know, there's some pros out there that are living in Russia, and, you know, they've got their house and their own compound, and, you know, everything's taken care of, and they're banking money away. We've got a couple guys now on the USA national team. Actually, you know, just only recently have USA volleyball players been able to retire from being professional volleyball players. Most of the time, it's a lifestyle decision, and it really is about, you know, getting that final chapter of volleyball in before you close the book on your playing career for most guys. And that's what it was for me. You know, I went out there and I was in a league where we got to, you know, win the division championship. I got to live in Spain for a couple of years. It was great, but I think I always knew that was a temporary lifestyle for me. And so making the transition at that time was not too difficult to leave things behind, except for, you know, the food, the pace of life, living small town Spain, you know, the 3 coffees a day kind of thing. Those were pretty special.
The siestas.
That's right, the siesta.
The tapas.
Yeah.
You know, what are some of the challenges that you face now switching back to the men's side? You know, you've coached in both. The game is obviously different, you know, speed of the game, the power of the game on the men's side, but administrative-wise, coaching-wise, what type of adjustments will you make, or do you have to make when going from the women to the men?
Well, I think you hit it. It's on the administrative and the managerial side more than anything. And it has less to do with the gender of athlete that we're training and more to do with the seat that I'm in. You know, you move that one seat over from assistant coach to head coach, and all of a sudden, it's everything. You know, there's not just, hey, this is your compartmentalized role within this staff. It's, you are now overseeing the entire staff and the direction of the program, and now it's your vision. And, oh, by the way, you're responsible for all of it. So in terms of making the shift, yes, the game's faster. The ball travels at a much higher rate, you know, and there's not as much reaction time, so we have to be a little crisper on some of the things we do, and maybe put a little bit more time in terms of where we set up, because we know there can't be a pursuit based on a ball that's traveling a little bit slower. But I think the big thing for me is right now it's establishing the vision, understanding the terrain that we have, and in those areas I'm very fortunate, because, you know, I had a good mentor in the game here in terms of John Sparrow was very visionary in terms of where he wanted to take this, and utilizing the resources that he did have. And as the program has grown, the vision, I think, on some level stays the same. I think we're now also in a place where we can expand upon that a little bit.
Describe the circumstances following, that went on in your life once John announced that he was taking the UCLA job. Were you immediately, your name was kind of one of the first I had heard in Rimmerville. Were you immediately looking to, take this job, or, were you already happy where you were at Illinois? You had helped them reach the NCAA championship match for the first time in history. Some people could say that's coincidence, but I think Anteater fans know that your talent had a lot to do with that. But what were the circumstances that were going on at the time when John made that announcement?
The spring is always a transitional period for any program. School is kind of wrapping up, and I think at Illinois we were very much invested in the process of how are we going to win in fall of 2013. And it was daunting, because what I will say is, while I think I had some contributions to make to that staff last year, and I'm comfortable saying that, I was a 2%er in that whole mix. We had two great lefts, Michelle Barch and Colleen Ward, and they absolutely, just anything that was imperfect about a game plan that I might have helped put together, they were able to bail us out in that high ball situation. So we kind of rode them all the way to the national championship match. But in terms of that time of year, I think what I was looking at is, this is a transition time. Okay, I'm re-engaging here for the next 2 or 3 years, and then I've got to start thinking about the next step. So when this came up, I think we all had it in the back of our mind that John was going to make a transition at some point, and I don't think anybody knew where. I think the only surprise for me was that he went to UCLA as opposed to the national team.
Okay.
And so when it came up, I had to kind of quickly assess, why would he leave a place like UC Irvine to go to a UCLA? And when those reasons came out, it made a little more sense. But I think at that point I was still evaluating, is this something that I want to do, leaving one great place to go to another great place? And obviously I made that choice, but it wasn't an easy decision, because Illinois was a great place to be.
You're quoted as saying Kevin Hemley, the coach at Illinois, facilitated your journey about the coach you wanted to become. Can you expand on that comment?
I can try. Yeah, Hemley is he's a pretty special human being, in terms of what he's doing with that program. But I would say more importantly, just the impact he has on the lives of those athletes. He kind of takes coaching to a whole new level. I think it's very easy to get myopic and start thinking about volleyball and winning titles and recruiting, and there's a lot of components to it, and we have to do that as coaches. That's part of our profession. I think Kevin, for me, is one of the few that have taken a team that far and really truly been invested in the people the whole way through, and not just the people within the team, but throughout the athletic department. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody that says anything negative about Kevin. And what I saw from him was a work ethic that I haven't seen anywhere else. He was always the first one up in the morning, first one in the office, pouring coffee before the athletic director got in, and he was the last one out in the evenings. And here we are as a staff with that as our role model, and that was pretty special. And obviously the workload of a Big Ten institution is a little bit different than some of the other schools, but his ability to manage that workload, manage the family life that he had, and then also be able to meet with the girls every couple weeks, for an hour or two with each of them, is something I haven't even heard of before. And to see it live was special.
How hard was it to let him know that you were going to pursue the UC Irvine job?
Actually, he let me know.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I think he had always kind of known. We had talked about that when I got hired at Illinois. One of the first things he said was, look, there's only a couple of places I'm willing to lose you after year one. He said, one is if the Irvine job opens up, because I think you need to take it, because you're going to be a head coach someday, no one's going to know that program better than you. If a national team opportunity opens up and you want to get on as an assistant, he goes, I did that. It's a pretty special experience, and only if you can really fully commit to it, and for a 4-year period, because you don't want to try to double duty that one. Just meaning trying to be in the collegiate game and the national team at the same time, because you don't get the full experience. And he said the only one past that is if you just decide you don't want to do volleyball anymore. He said, but if it's something outside of those three, you better lock in for a few more years here at Illinois. So when this popped up, he and his entire family were supportive. And it was hard for them too, obviously, because that meant they needed to look for a new assistant and a replacement, but they were very supportive of the opportunity.
So you're announced as head coach, and immediately you take the team to Argentina. How did that come about? I know you've been involved with international teams over the years at UC Irvine, but how did that trip come about?
Yeah, again, you just sometimes you just sit back and let the universe do its work. That one fell into our laps again. We had basically a return of obligation visit for that trip. You know, we went down in 2008, and they hosted us. And then we held that international tournament for a few years, and we brought in teams from all around the world. So Argentina being one of them, but certainly Brazil, China, Japan, Korea, even a team from Holland over the years. So they called us, or they called me specifically after John left and just said, hey, would you be interested in coming down again? And I said, well, look, I don't even have the job, so I will pass that message along. And once that job came through for me, you know, I obviously confirmed that we'd be able to make it. So.
Was this the first time for a lot of those guys to travel abroad into, you know, or even to Argentina? Yeah,
there were a couple new passports on the trip. A couple guys had to get down to the passport office. Most of the guys had traveled before. A couple of them had traveled with volleyball, mostly, you know, through USA Junior National or Youth National Team stuff. But yeah, Argentina was the first time for all but a couple of them, I believe.
So you've been there a couple times now. What is volleyball like in Argentina? Is there a big passion for it?
Well, there's a big passion for just about everything in Argentina from what I've experienced. Soccer will always be, you know, king.
Number one.
Yeah, there's no question. But there's a stronghold of volleyball there as well. There's a lot more money in the league than there has been in years past. Marcelo Tinelli has had Drian Bolivar, which is the top team that came here a few years in a row, and the team ultimately that hosted us in 2008. They've kind of led the charge. You know, they signed on Giva from the Brazilian national team, so he's playing for them. There's a salary cap that, well, there is no salary cap anymore actually with that team, Bolivar, but they brought in some players that have really made that league a little bit more well known, and you know, we got to ride on that a little bit.
You touched upon, you know, bringing the international tournament to UC Irvine, and that's happened for 3 or 4 years now. Why were you so invested in that tournament? Why did you think that was such an important experience for your guys to have?
You know, volleyball in Orange County, boys specifically, you know, we are the mecca of boys volleyball in the United States of America. Being in Orange County, being in Irvine, being close to Newport Beach, the largest volleyball clubs in the nation are right in our backyard. And in terms of, you know, being one of the sports at the university that can compete against the Big Ten, the BCS schools, the Pac-12 schools, and consistently win is pretty special. And I think one of the ways that we kind of carve out our own signature in this, being a mid-major competing with the Giants, is that we can bring those teams in. You know, we can demonstrate that we can play a high-level competition, that we can be the bridge between college and international, and that we don't necessarily need the football school resources to do all that. So I think that was part of it. And the other part is it's just fun. You know, I mean, it's such a special experience for these guys to be able to play against the best in the world, you know, and bring in guys that were former Olympians and pro players. And obviously going abroad is a great experience, but that only happens once every 4 years. Right. So there was a question in my mind after that first trip. We're on the bus, and I'm, you know, trying to translate the handbook for that tournament down in Argentina into English the whole time I'm there, and just trying to figure out, can we create this experience in Irvine? Can we bring that global or international feel back to campus instead of always having to go out for it? And obviously the answer is yes. Now, where that goes in the future remains to be seen, but the experience those guys had was so special.
Well, I was going to ask you, because we are not having that tournament this year. Are you and the staff going to work to bring that tournament back? Is that kind of on the docket?
I think we'll always look for international exposure, you know, and I think whether we do a formal tournament or not remains to be seen. You know, I don't know that that's a necessary component of the international or volleyball experience at Irvine. What we do need to have is we need to honor the teams that want to come in. So even this year we had a team from Shanghai, China come in. It's the top team from Shanghai. They've won the league championship 9 out of the last 14. And we brought them in. They brought themselves in, truthfully. We played them off-site. We scrimmaged them a couple times, sent them down to a couple different schools, had a great experience. So if that's the way it's going to be, that's fine too. The important thing for us is we get that international experience.
We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about the team, get a quick season preview from you. But we'll be right back with David Kniffin on the Blue and Gold Report on KUCI.